Single dad steps in when bully attacks his CEO's son at school. Garrison Thorne shifted the heavy box of printer paper onto his shoulder, feeling the familiar ache in his lower back that had been his companion since his third deployment to Afghanistan. The warehouse of Nexus Technologies stretched endlessly before him, fluorescent lights humming overhead like mechanical wasps. He checked his watch. 11:47 a.m. 13 minutes until his lunch break, when he could grab a sandwich from the vending machine and call Lily's school to make sure she'd remembered her inhaler. Being a single dad meant his mind was always in two places at once, even when his body was hauling inventory through the massive distribution center on the outskirts of Denver. The divorce had been finalized 2 years ago, right after he'd gotten out of the army. Sarah hadn't been able to handle the changes in him, the nights when he'd wake up sweating, the way loud noises made him flinch. She'd taken her things but left Lily, saying she needed to find herself in California. Garrison hadn't fought it. Lily needed stability, and despite everything broken inside him, he could give her that. Even if stability meant working for $14 an hour moving boxes while his knees screamed protests from too many years of carrying 90 pounds of gear through mountain terrain. At noon sharp, he clocked out and headed for the small park across from the warehouse complex. It was where the office workers from the main Nexus building often ate lunch, with its maintained grass and shade trees that offered respite from the Colorado sun. Garrison preferred it to the break room, where conversations about weekend plans and new cars reminded him of everything he couldn't give Lily. He just unwrapped his peanut butter sandwich when he heard the commotion. 3 young men, probably college age, from the nearby University of Colorado campus, had surrounded someone by the fountain. Garrison could see expensive sneakers and designer jeans on the aggressors, the kind Lily always pointed out in store windows before quickly adding she didn't really need them. The one in the middle, tall with slicked-back blonde hair, was doing most of the talking. "You think you're special, don't you?" the blonde one said, shoving the person in the center. "Walking around campus like you own the place. But you're nothing without Daddy's money." Garrison stood up, his sandwich forgotten. Through a gap in the circle, he could see their victim, a young man, maybe 20, wearing a simple grey hoodie and worn jeans. His backpack had spilled open on the ground, textbooks scattered across the pavement. The kid's hands were shaking as he tried to gather his belongings, but the blonde one kicked a book further away. "Please, just leave me alone," the victim said, his voice steady despite the situation. "I haven't done anything to you, Trevor." Trevor laughed, an ugly sound that made Garrison's jaw clench. "You exist, that's enough. You and your whole family thinking you're better than everyone else. But look at you now. Where's your bodyguard? Where's Daddy's security team?" The victim stood up slowly, and Garrison could see his face clearly now. Asian features, thick-rimmed glasses, a split lip already beginning to swell. "I don't have a bodyguard. I'm just trying to go to school like everyone else." "Right," Trevor said, pulling back his fist. "Let's see how well you study with a broken nose." Garrison moved before he'd made a conscious decision to do so. 12 years of military training took over, his body flowing into motion with an efficiency that his warehouse work never required. He caught Trevor's wrist mid-swing, applying just enough pressure to make the younger man gasp. "That's enough," Garrison said quietly. His voice carried the same tone he'd used with nervous privates, calm but unmistakably authoritative. Trevor tried to wrench his arm free. "This isn't your business, man. Let go. It became my business when you decided to make it 3-on-1. Garrison released Trevor's wrist, but positioned himself between the bullies and their victim. "Walk away. Now." One of Trevor's friends, shorter but stockier, stepped forward. "You don't know who you're messing with, dude. Trevor's dad owns half the commercial real estate in Denver." Garrison almost laughed. These kids thought Daddy's money made them untouchable. He'd faced down Taliban fighters in the mountains of Kandahar province. 3 spoiled college boys didn't even register as a threat. I don't care if his dad owns the whole state. You're done here." Trevor's face had turned red, either from embarrassment or anger. "You're going to regret this. I'll have you arrested for assault." "For stopping you from assaulting someone else?" Garrison pulled out his phone. "Should I call the police now, or would you prefer to leave while you can still claim this was just a misunderstanding?" The stocky friend tugged on Trevor's arm. "Come on, man. There are people watching now." Garrison glanced around. Several office workers had stopped eating their lunches to observe the confrontation. A few had their phones out, recording. Trevor seemed to notice the audience for the first time, and his bravado crumbled. "This isn't over," he said to the victim, but the threat sounded hollow now. The three of them walked away, Trevor shooting one last glare at Garrison before they disappeared around the corner. Garrison turned to help the young man gather his scattered belongings. Up close, he could see the kid was trying hard not to cry, his hands still trembling as he picked up a physics textbook. "You okay?" Garrison asked, handing him a notebook that had landed near the fountain. "Yes, thank you. I will be." The young man adjusted his glasses, which had been knocked askew. "You didn't have to do that. You could have gotten hurt." Garrison shrugged. "Those types are all talk. Besides, couldn't just stand by and watch." He picked up the last book, noting the advanced engineering texts. "You a student at CU?" "Yes, mechanical engineering. 3rd year." The young man extended his hand. "I'm David Chen. Garrison Thorne." They shook hands, David's grip surprisingly firm despite his earlier fear. "What was that all about, if you don't mind me asking?" David sighed, shouldering his backpack. "Trevor Wellington. He's in my program. His family has money, old Denver money, and he found out that my family—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "My family has done well recently, very well. He thinks I'm at CU because of connections, not merit. He's been making my life hell for months." "You should report him," Garrison said. "I've tried. His father donates a lot to the university. Nothing ever comes of it." David looked at Garrison curiously. "Are you military? The way you moved, how you handled Trevor?" "Former. Army Rangers, 12 years. Garrison glanced at his watch. His lunch break was almost over. "Look, David, you should get that lip looked at. The campus health center." "I'll be fine. Really?" David pulled out his phone. Would it be okay if I got your contact information? I'd like to thank you properly, maybe buy you dinner or something." Garrison almost declined. He didn't need charity or pity from a college kid, even a wealthy one. But something in David's earnest expression made him reconsider. "Sure." They exchanged numbers quickly. "I mean it," David said. "You have no idea what this means to me. People usually just watch. Take care of yourself, David." Garrison headed back toward the warehouse, his sandwich forgotten on the bench. He had 4 more hours of shifting inventory. Then he needed to pick up Lily from her after-school program. He'd already forgotten about the encounter by the time he clocked back in. 2 weeks passed in their usual rhythm. Morning routine with Lily, work at the warehouse, evenings helping with homework and making sure she practiced her violin, even though they'd had to rent the cheapest one the music store offered. Garrison had almost forgotten about the incident in the park when his supervisor, Mike, approached him during his shift. "Thorne, you need to report to the main building, executive floor." Garrison's stomach dropped. The executive floor meant one thing: termination. Had he damaged inventory without realizing it? Been too slow meeting quotas? "What's this about, Mike?" Mike shrugged, but he looked nervous. "No idea. The call came from the CEO's office directly. They want you there in 30 minutes. The walk from the warehouse to the main Nexus Technologies building felt like a funeral march. Garrison had been so careful, so diligent. This job might not pay much, but it had health insurance for Lily. He couldn't lose it. The main building was all glass and steel, a monument to modern corporate architecture that made Garrison feel even more out of place in his warehouse uniform. The executive floor was on the 32nd level. Garrison's ears popped in the express elevator, and he emerged into a reception area that probably cost more to furnish than he made in a year. A secretary with perfectly styled hair looked up from her computer. "Mr. Thorne, Mr. Chen is expecting you, right through those doors." Chen. The name tickled something in Garrison's memory, but he was too nervous to place it. He walked through heavy oak doors into an office that seemed to stretch forever. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Rocky Mountains. Behind a massive desk sat a woman in her late 40s, elegant in a way that spoke of understated wealth. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple style, and her dark eyes studied Garrison with an intensity that made him stand a little straighter. "Mr. Thorne, please, sit." Her voice carried a slight accent he couldn't place. "I'm Victoria Chen, CEO of Nexus Technologies." Garrison sat in the offered chair, his mind racing. The CEO herself. This was worse than he'd thought. "I understand you're wondering why you're here," Victoria continued. She turned a picture frame on her desk toward him. "Do you recognize this young man?" Garrison leaned forward and felt his breath catch. It was David, the kid from the park, wearing a cap and gown at what looked like a high school graduation. Next to him stood Victoria, beaming with pride. "That's David, from the park." Victoria's composed expression cracked slightly, revealing a flash of deep emotion. "My son. He told me what you did for him 2 weeks ago." The pieces clicked into place with almost audible force. David Chen, the CEO's son. The kid he'd helped was the heir to a technology empire worth billions. "Mrs. Chen, I didn't know," which makes what you did even more meaningful. Victoria stood and walked to the window, her reflection wavering in the glass. "David has struggled since we moved to Denver 3 years ago. Being the CEO's son, especially when you're trying to earn your degree on your own merits, has been challenging. He insisted on attending classes without security, wanted to be normal. I agreed, against my better judgment." She turned back to face Garrison. "He's been harassed for months. He told me it was manageable, that he was handling it. I didn't know how bad it had gotten until he came home 2 weeks ago with a split lip and told me about you." "Anyone would have done the same," Garrison said automatically. "No, Mr. Thorne, they wouldn't, and didn't. For months, people watched my son being tormented and did nothing." Victoria returned to her desk, pulling out a file. "I've done some research on you. 12 years in the Rangers, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, divorced, raising a daughter alone, working in our warehouse for $14 an hour despite having a bachelor's degree in business management from University of Texas." Garrison shifted uncomfortably. "The degree was from before I enlisted. It's been a long time, and the job market is terrible for veterans, I know." Victoria opened the file. "Your supervisor says you're never late, never miss a shift unless your daughter is sick, and you're one of the most reliable workers they have. You're overqualified for warehouse work, Mr. Thorne. With respect, Mrs. Chen, I'm grateful for the job I have." Victoria smiled, the first warm expression he'd seen from her. "David said you'd say something like that. He's been quite insistent that I find a way to thank you. He's threatened to switch his major to social work if I don't, and considering the fortune I've spent on engineering textbooks, I'm taking him seriously." Despite his nervousness, Garrison found himself almost smiling. "I'm offering you a position in our logistics department," Victoria continued. "Operations manager. The salary is $70,000 to start, with full benefits, including educational assistance for your daughter. The hours are regular business hours, no evening or weekend shifts." Garrison felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. 70,000, more than double what he made now. Regular hours. He could be home for dinner with Lily every night. Mrs. Chen, this is incredibly generous, but I can't accept charity. It's not charity. Victoria's tone turned businesslike. Your military experience with supply chain management in hostile environments is directly applicable. Your degree, while dated, shows you have the educational foundation. And most importantly, you've already demonstrated the kind of character I want in my management team. The kind that does the right thing even when there's no benefit to themselves. A knock at the door interrupted them. David peered in, looking much better than he had 2 weeks ago. The split lip had healed, and he seemed more confident. "Mom, is this a bad time?" "Not at all. Mr. Thorne and I were just discussing his new position." David's face lit up. "You're taking it, right? Please tell me you're taking it." Garrison looked between mother and son, seeing the same earnestness in both faces. "I need to think about this." "Of course," Victoria said. "Take the weekend." But David has also insisted on one condition that's non-negotiable. "What's that?" David grinned. "You and your daughter are having dinner with us Sunday night. Mom makes incredible dim sum, and I want to meet the girl whose dad is basically Captain America." Garrison thought about Lily, about the violin she wanted but never asked for, about the college fund he couldn't contribute to, about all the opportunities this could give her. "Dinner I can do, but I'll need to bring dessert." "Deal," David said quickly. That Sunday, Garrison stood outside a mansion in Cherry Hills Village, holding a store-bought apple pie and Lily's hand. His daughter, 11 years old with his stubborn chin and her mother's green eyes, was uncharacteristically quiet. "It's really big, Dad," she whispered. "Yeah, it is, but they're just people, Lily Pad. Be yourself." The door opened before he could ring the bell. David stood there in jeans and a Colorado Rockies t-shirt, looking nothing like a billionaire's son. "You made it, and you must be Lily. I heard you play violin." Lily nodded shyly. "Just started this year." "That's awesome. I played cello in high school. Terribly, but my mom made me stick with it. Come on." She's in the kitchen arguing with the dumpling dough. The inside of the house was less imposing than Garrison had expected. Yes, it was enormous and expensively furnished, but there were family photos everywhere, David's textbooks scattered on a coffee table, and the smell of cooking food that made it feel lived in. Victoria emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron covered in flour. "Garrison, Lily, welcome. I hope you're hungry. I may have overcooked." The dining room table was covered with more food than Garrison had seen outside of army mess halls. Dumplings, spring rolls, rice dishes, vegetables prepared in ways he couldn't identify, but that smelled incredible. Lily's eyes went wide. "This is amazing, Mrs. Chen," she said. "Victoria, please. And this is nothing. You should see what I make for Chinese New Year." The conversation flowed easier than Garrison had expected. David and Lily bonded over music, with David promising to help her with her violin practice. Victoria asked thoughtful questions about Garrison's military service, showing a genuine understanding of the challenges veterans faced. She shared her own story of coming to America from Taiwan with nothing but a computer science degree and a determination to succeed. "The tech industry wasn't kind to Asian women when I started," she said, serving Lily another helping of dumplings. "I learned early that you had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. But I also learned the importance of allies, people who stand up for you when you can't stand up for yourself." After dinner, while David was showing Lily his old cello in the music room, Victoria and Garrison stood on the back patio, overlooking the lights of Denver. "I meant what I said about the job," Victoria said. "It's not charity. I've built this company by recognizing talent and character when I see it. You have both." "I've been out of the corporate world for a long time," Garrison admitted. "I might need time to get up to speed. Everyone needs time." David struggled his first year at CU, but he's thriving now, partly because he knows he has support. She paused. "I understand what it's like to raise a child alone, to worry about their future. My husband died when David was 7. Cancer. Building this company wasn't just about success for me. It was about ensuring David would have opportunities. Garrison thought about Lily's laughter coming from inside the house, a sound he heard too rarely these days. When would I start? 2 weeks? That gives you time to transition out of the warehouse properly. Victoria smiled. Mike will be sad to lose you, but I've already approved a raise for him to help him cope. Monday morning, Garrison submitted his 2 weeks' notice. Mike congratulated him with genuine warmth. Word spread quickly through the warehouse, with his co-workers offering a mix of congratulations and good-natured jealousy. 2 weeks later, he reported to the main building, this time with a key card that gave him access to the logistics department on the 15th floor. The job was challenging. Garrison had to learn new software systems, understand international shipping regulations, and manage a team of 20 people. But his military experience translated better than he'd expected. Logistics was logistics, whether you were moving ammunition through Afghanistan or electronics through customs. His team, initially skeptical of the warehouse guy turned manager, quickly learned that he worked as hard as he expected them to, and that he'd never ask them to do something he wouldn't do himself. 6 months into his new position, Garrison stood in his office, his own office with a door and everything, reviewing quarterly reports when David knocked. Got a minute? Always. Garrison had grown fond of David, who stopped by regularly to check in. The young man had also become a fixture in Lily's life, tutoring her in math and helping with her violin practice. I wanted to thank you again, David said, sitting down. Not just for that day in the park, but for everything since. Lily told me you're able to afford a better violin for her now. She's really talented. She's practicing 3 hours a day. I'm not sure if I should be proud or concerned. David laughed. Mom was the same way with me and the cello. Obsessive focus runs in the family. He grew serious. Trevor Wellington was expelled last week. Turns out I wasn't the only one he was harassing. After the video of you confronting him went viral on campus, other students came forward. Garrison hadn't known there was a video. Good. Actions should have consequences. Mom wants to invite you and Lily for Thanksgiving. She's already planning the menu. Fair warning, she cooks for an army even when it's just 4 people. We'd love to come. Thanksgiving at the Chen house became a tradition, as did Christmas Eve dim sum, 4th of July barbecues, where Victoria proved she could handle an American grill as well as a wok, and Sunday dinners whenever schedules aligned. Lily flourished with the additional support, her grades improving and her confidence growing. She and David developed a sibling-like relationship, with him attending every one of her recitals and her pestering him about his engineering projects. A year after that first confrontation in the park, Garrison received a promotion to senior operations manager. He'd proven himself through merit, streamlining processes that saved the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some colleagues whispered about favoritism, but his results spoke louder than gossip. One evening, as Garrison was leaving the office, he found Victoria waiting by his car in the parking garage. "We need to talk," she said, and for a moment he felt that old fear of impending termination. "Is everything okay?" "David is graduating next month, summa cum laude." Pride radiated from her voice. He's had several job offers, including one from Tesla, but he wants to work here, in our engineering department. "That's great. He's brilliant. He'll be an asset." Victoria leaned against his car, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "He says he wants to earn his position, not be given it. He's requested to start in an entry-level role and work his way up. I wanted your opinion." Garrison considered. "Let him. He's got your work ethic and determination. He'll prove himself quickly, and he'll have the respect of his colleagues because they'll see he earned it." Victoria smiled. "That's what I thought too. You've been a good influence on him, Garrison. On both of us." There was something in her tone, a warmth that went beyond professional gratitude. They'd grown closer over the past year, their relationship evolving from employer-employee to friends, to something Garrison wasn't quite ready to name. "You've both been pretty good influences on us too," he said. 2 years after the incident in the park, Garrison stood in his backyard, a modest house in Littleton he'd been able to buy with his new salary, watching Lily and David set up for her 14th birthday party. She'd invited her school orchestra friends, and David was helping her string lights between the trees. Victoria stood beside him, holding a glass of lemonade. Their relationship had evolved slowly, carefully, with both of them cautious about changing the dynamic that had worked so well. But 6 months ago, she'd kissed him after a particularly successful product launch, and they'd been quietly together since. "She's getting tall," Victoria observed. "She's going to be taller than me soon." "Don't remind me. I'm not ready for her to grow up." Victoria slipped her hand into his. "You're doing an amazing job with her. She's confident, kind, talented. She stands up for other kids at school, you know. David told me she intervened when some older students were picking on a freshman last month." Garrison squeezed her hand. "Wonder where she learned that." "From someone who does the right thing, even when it's hard." The party was a success. Lily performed a violin solo that left everyone speechless. David led an impromptu engineering demonstration that somehow made physics fun, and Victoria helped serve the cake she'd insisted on baking herself. As the sun set and the guests started leaving, Garrison found himself on the porch with David. "I never thanked you properly," David said. "Not really. You've thanked me 100 times." "No, I mean, that day in the park. I was ready to give up. On school, on trying to fit in, on everything. Trevor had been making my life hell, and I felt so alone. When you stepped in, it wasn't just about stopping the bullying. It was about someone seeing me as worth protecting." Garrison put a hand on David's shoulder. "You were always worth protecting. Sometimes we just need someone to remind us." David nodded, then grinned. "So, when are you going to officially ask my mom out?" "Because this sneaking around thing is getting old, and Lily and I have a betting pool going." Garrison laughed, a full, genuine sound that would have seemed foreign to him 3 years ago. "Soon, I promise." Later that evening, after the party was over, and Lily was inside practicing her new piece, Garrison and Victoria sat on the porch swing he'd installed last month. "David knows about us," he said. "Lily too. She asked me if she should call me Victoria or Mom." Victoria's voice was soft. "I told her whatever felt right to her." Garrison turned to look at her. "And what feels right to you?" "This, all of this. You, me, our kids. It feels like family." He thought about that day in the park 3 years ago, how a simple decision to intervene had changed everything. He'd been barely holding on then, working a dead-end job, struggling to provide for Lily, carrying the weight of his past like shrapnel in his soul. Now he had a career he was proud of. Lily had opportunities he'd never dreamed of giving her, and he'd found love again when he'd thought that part of his life was over. "You know what the funny thing is," he said. "I almost didn't get involved that day. I thought it wasn't my business." "What changed your mind?" Garrison thought about it. "I remembered something my squad leader used to say in Afghanistan. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. I couldn't be one of those men who did nothing." Victoria leaned her head against his shoulder. "I'm glad you couldn't." 6 months later, Garrison stood in the Chen family garden, wearing his best suit, the one Victoria had helped him pick out, watching Lily walk down an improvised aisle as maid of honor. David stood beside him as best man, grinning widely. The wedding was small, just family and close friends, exactly what they'd both wanted. As Victoria walked toward him, radiant in a simple white dress, Garrison thought about the winding path that had brought them here. a veteran struggling with civilian life, a CEO who'd built an empire while raising a son alone, two single parents who'd found each other through an act of simple human decency. In his vows, Garrison said, "You taught me that doing the right thing isn't just about the moment of action. It's about what grows from that moment, the connections we make, the families we build, the love we choose to nurture. You and David didn't just change my life, you gave me a new one." Victoria's vows were equally moving. "You showed me that strength isn't about power or position. It's about standing up for others, about choosing courage over comfort, about building something together that's stronger than what we could build alone." As they kissed, Lily and David cheered the loudest, already planning their first vacation as a blended family. 5 years after that day in the park, Garrison stood in his office. He was VP of Operations now, looking at a photo on his desk. It showed all four of them at David's MIT graduation, where he'd earned his master's in engineering. Lily stood beside him in her Yale acceptance letter t-shirt, her violin scholarship having opened doors Garrison could never have imagined. A knock interrupted his thoughts. One of his newer employees, a young veteran fresh from the Navy, stood in the doorway looking nervous. "Mr. Thorne, I wanted to thank you for taking a chance on me. I know my resume wasn't the strongest." Garrison smiled. "Sometimes the strongest qualifications don't show up on paper. Character matters more than credentials." After the employee left, Garrison returned to his work, but his mind drifted to that day in the park. One moment of choosing to act, of refusing to be a bystander, had rippled outward in ways he never could have predicted. He'd gained not just a job, but a career, not just a benefactor, but a partner, not just opportunities, but a family. That evening, at dinner with Victoria, Lily and David, who was home visiting from his job at Nexus's new renewable energy division, they talked about Lily's upcoming violin performance at Carnegie Hall, David's innovative solar panel design, Victoria's plans for expanding the company's veteran hiring program, and the vacation they were planning to take to visit Garrison's Rangers buddies in Texas. "Dad," Lily said, "my friend Sarah is being bullied at school. I'm thinking about talking to the principal, but I'm worried it might make things worse for her." Garrison and Victoria exchanged a look, both remembering another incident of bullying and the intervention that had changed everything. "What do you think is the right thing to do?" Garrison asked. Lily straightened in her chair, reminding him so much of the scared but determined 11-year-old who'd walked into the Chen mansion for the first time. "Stand up for her, even if it's hard. Especially if it's hard." "Then you have your answer," Victoria said, reaching over to squeeze Lily's hand. David raised his glass of water. "To doing the right thing." They all raised their glasses, echoing the toast. As they clinked glasses, Garrison caught Victoria's eye and smiled. The boy he'd helped in the park was now a successful engineer. His daughter was heading to Yale. He'd found love and purpose, and a life he'd never dared dream of. All because, one afternoon in a park in Denver, he'd decided that standing by and doing nothing wasn't an option. The right thing rarely came with the promise of reward, but sometimes, just sometimes, the universe paid attention and set into motion changes that transformed ordinary moments into extraordinary lives. Looking around the table at his family, Garrison knew that even if nothing had come from that intervention, even if he'd never learned David's last name or met Victoria, he would make the same choice again. Because doing the right thing wasn't about what you got in return. But sometimes, if you were very lucky, what you got in return was everything.